deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science. An awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you once again our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents Animal Husbandry, Weaponized Education System 1902. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now let's receive our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam, Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum, Salam, Vadimekum. We're going to talk a little bit about the General Education Board 1902 and the weaponization. This education system is actually was constructed as a social engineering weapon, targeted mainly at the Aboriginal people, and then later used against the hybrid Europeans who are part of the membership of the United States Corporation Company, which has been fronted falsely as a country since 1871 under the Organic Act of Congress, 1871. Now, keep in mind, the General Education Board was set up by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates in 1902. And this was during the same period of time in Shakamoxon territory that you know as Philadelphia, that they murdered Winona and were making claims on the land, reversionary claims on the land under their doctrine of discovery, etc. One of the reasons we're having this conversation is that last week I was talking to Sheik Taj Bey, who's also Prime Minister, Moorish Nation, Northwestern Mexican, etc., who has been operating school for Moorish children for about a decade now. And we were having a general conversation also with the children. And as many of you know, over the years, we've mentioned to many of you the animal husbandry training that our people have been suffering from and not knowing it. And because also as I was traveling, a few people had asked me about details of animal husbandry. Now, the concept that the people have had or have been taught is that the General Education Board set up in 1902, the implication has been that the education was for human development, excellence, the established traditional disciplines and arts, generally known with the universities of the world, most of the universities of the world which have been established in Iberia and in Africa by the different Moorish tribes. And so the backbone of fundamental erudition for humans, which includes the 7 liberal arts, etc., actually is from African Berber culture. Now, when the hybrid Europeans took over at North America, they established the animal husbandry training. And one of the things that John D. Rockefeller has always said is that they do not want thinkers, they want workers. Even when you're looking at the established practice here at North America under the United States corporation jurisdiction and the subdivisional corporate states distinguished from the overthrown republic order, the practice has always been to deceive the people into thinking that they were getting compensated for their labor. And so one of the things that they also did, and this is around 1913 area, between 1902 and 1913 era, they established the 9-to-5 practice that you see today to take up the best hours of the day to keep the people working for the corporation under the guise that they were working for their families. And then they would tax them and convert their labor or their wages into foreign corporate profit based on corporate investment. And that's called income. That doesn't really apply to humans. It applies to corporate activities of foreigners operating in the ports of other countries, etc. And so one of the things they've done, not only have they by design misdirected and blocked the people from human erudition and the fundamental rules of the 7 liberal arts, including the disciplines and the truth of human erudition in the universities that have been established for hundreds of years prior to hybrid European taking over, particularly at North America. So they designed what they refer to as animal husbandry. Now, people who don't understand animal husbandry itself is the art and the discipline or the science of breeding animals and breeding crops on the farm, etc. And also dealing with management, or what you call skilled management of the economic system relative to livestock. And so the people sending their children to the General Education Board operations have been deceived deliberately, thinking that they were sending their children to be made erudite, to accelerate and to participate in higher learnings of eruditions and the 7 liberal arts, etc., for human development and skills, etc. When in actuality, the General Education Board is actually a social engineering weapon, and they've never told the people that. So when you know that it's animal husbandry, you can understand when you go into research of how they've been not only genociding the Aboriginal people of the land, but also they hide or they present the guise of what they call Christianization, when it's really Constantine operations of unum sanctum and doctrine of discovery. And we've been suffering from this for actually generations. And over the years, over the decades, you've had different writers and researchers who have written books about, like in the order of Little Johnny Can't Read, and why in so-called the rural folk of the communities, the common people of the land, had difficulties in their mathematics skills, in their reading skills, the absence of an Edamon degree, which is standard in grammatication, etc. And of course, that has over the decades, actually increased in its damage relative to the people, particularly people who are targeted in what they refer to sociologically as the inner city, etc. None of that has been accidental. All of that is animal husbandry. And Dr. Nayon,
Yes.
can you share with the people the cover page of the philosophy for the General Education Board?
I'm not sure if I have the cover page, but I have a quote from Frederick T. Gates.
And the philosophy?
Let's see.
Now, yeah. Now in their philosophy, they actually expose. Now, keep in mind, all of you who are sharing this evening with us here at the House of Reawakening Minds, go into your say YouTube. You might find it on YouTube, but it's generally public information. The General Education Board 1902, and scroll down to the philosophy page, and you will see that they actually make it public, the animal husbandry. Can you share that with us, Dr. J?
Okay, let me see if it's showing up here. Okay, let me try to make it bigger. Okay, here it is. It's a quote by Frederick T. Gates, one of the members of the General Education Board. I believe this is the great-grandfather of that other guy with Gates.
Yeah, same family.
In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is simple, as well as a very beautiful one: to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are. And that's normally the quote that there. End quote.
Now, in their homes, in their shops, and on the farm. Now, I'm sure, like when you're looking up the philosophy section in the General Education Board, you'll find also links to other quotations that were made even up to 1953 and to 56, and you'll see that that same pattern of animal husbandry has been inculcated by the General Education Board across the land in all levels of education system. As a matter of fact, even recently, go ahead, Dr. G.
I just, it's something that just stuck out to me, and it just be my mind. In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. We shall not search for embryo, right? Which that part comes to mind, that even at birth, they know who we are, and they do their astrology and numerology and so forth at birth. And even though they may see these possible potential traits
they will suppress them.
There you go. That's what I wanted to.
Now, when you begin to comprehend that this is preparing the people for the labor force, and the people were thinking, or the parents were thinking, that they were delivering their children for an erudition relative to human development or higher learning, that they were actually doing the absolute opposite. And you'll also recognize, when you begin to study, you can see the pattern or the philosophy held behind even the footprint on the birth certificate, that most people would think that was totally unrelated, and it's totally related. From the very womb, they're claiming the child as livestock. This is why as many people begin to learn about the stock market operating at North America from Wall Street, and they see livestock, and they see the different instrumentalities that they've learned over the last couple of decades about the marriage certificate and the birth certificate actually being bonds on the people and funding United States corporation company, etc., you can see the absolute relationship or the functional weaponization of the General Education Board that actually prepared the people to counter any critical thinking or any concept that they were actually being trained like animals on a farm. And not only that, you'll notice that even in these late decades, many people get or pay for and sacrifice and go into debt for an education that, for the most part, is totally useless to them. And most of the time, when they get into the so-called workforce, that debt usually carries with them most of their work life, and so they're still enslaved. And most of the jobs that are available or that would be availed to them, and that would be what would be executed in society in what you call block forms or zoned forms, which means targeted people would not be allowed to have certain avail to them certain areas in the workforce that would allow them to even pay the debt on these so-called jobs that were, for the most part, non-functional anyway. And then, for many of you have done research in the social engineering or the corporate world operations, you would recognize over the decades, and it's not so much that they do it recently, but in the last, say, 40, 50 years, the corporations would acquire people coming out of college and then have funding put aside to retrain them because the education that they had was totally non-functional, actually basically obsolete. And so, but it was used as a key for them to be able to engineer the social structure and to create a caste system so it's sort of like a pass key, not functional in itself, but a pass key because by virtue of the degree. And that way they could also maintain a caste system without looking or having it appear like that the corporate government via the education system was actually structuring the unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery caste system via the education system. And so for the few of the lower or targeted peoples of the land, the true Americans, the Aboriginal people, it was assured that they would rarely ever achieve or hold any position in the workforce that had any what you would call real beneficial compensation to the level of their skills or to the level of their input. And then they would hide that under the guise of the Carlos Linnaeus mental phenotype operations under the guise of racism. And then have the people over generations arguing race and prejudice when actually it's a constructed caste system via the education system, via animal husbandry. And I also want you all to pay attention to that and break that down by every paragraph, and you'll absolutely recognize the social structure in the communities, and you'll recognize why many of the children can get even up to early, say, high school, and many of the children's reading skills are very heavily flawed, and their mathematics skills are heavily flawed. And you'll see that people will start gathering in their communities, having little groups to address the problems with the children's education, so-called education, after having paid the highest level of taxes on their homes to fund the General Education Board. As a matter of fact, when the average tax that are on the poor people in the cities, the highest tax on their houses is the education board education tax, and they get little to nothing for it. And the education that they get is also obsolete from its inception. meaning that by design it's non-functional. On surface of appearance, yes. In function, in reality, in application, not at all. Now, for many of the people, and particularly the indigenous and aboriginal people of the land, you should be focusing on removing your children from the hands of these social engineerings as quickly as possible and as rationally as possible, and start funding your own schools, knowing that the so-called education presented to them was only placed to damage them, to actually put them in perpetual servitude, to by structure of blind faith make them believe that the education was equal to erudition when it is not. And for the most part, the average person would be handicapped from childhood their entire lives. And again, the damage that has been done to the people is hidden under the guise or the social engineering argument of racism and prejudice, which is a total and destructive falsehood. And Dr. G, you know, when I was talking to Sheik Taj earlier this week with the children, and we were discussing some of these things, one of the things that I had brought up was the federal domestic grants and assistance. Now, the federal domestic grants and assistance by law has to do with funds that nations or people that are under occupation, that the occupying powers are supposed to put finance aside. Whereas, like, say, for instance, if someone that's aware of the animal husbandry and they wanted to start an institution that's not subjected to the General Education Board operations designed to damage their children, they're supposed to, like, say, for instance, if you saw a building, as an example, a school building that was empty, or even any building that was functional whatsoever, for anything that was directed to the community, that the federal government was obligated to deliver that building to qualified people, indigenous people, in their proper person, by international law and by treaty law, and to fund all operations to assure that it was stabilized, etc., including payment of staff, etc., without any what you call debt, etc. And that comes under federal domestic grants and assistance. And they don't promote that mainly because they don't want people to know about it. And two, a lot of the funding has been falsely or indirectly directed over the years to many of the persons usually assigned within the community from one of the 501c3 orders, religious orders. And you'll see, like, in federal lands where you've seen them have say project houses, cramped project houses, where the preacher has his name on the so-called project. A lot of that funding came from that funds, and they don't tell people that, and that's a fact. And so you recognize over the generations that not only has the funding been misappropriated and wrongly used, and most of the people to whom those fundings were to be issued didn't even know about it and still don't know about it. And many of the people don't know about it to this day. Now, many of you around the land who have been concerned with the miseducation of your children, I would suggest you look into that, but also recognize this. The politicians, being corrupt as they are, and being de facto for the most part, will try to color applications in that area which should not be covered or colored. So I would suggest that you do some deep research to assure that when you go and do your proposals for that funding that's supposed to be put aside every year, that they don't try to compromise you and put you under the corporate state's jurisdiction, which is not supposed to happen. Now, also, when you're looking at this, look at the rights of indigenous peoples of part one, yeah, 1 to 6, etc., and put that into context when you're looking into also the federal domestic grants and assistance, because you're not supposed to be, truthfully, not supposed to even have your children into those corporate schools. And they also didn't tell the people that either. And that's for Aboriginal and indigenous people. Yes, Dr.
With
J.
everything collapsing as we know it is, will that even matter going forth?
No, well, we're having this conversation because, over the years, as we've talked, we've been mentioning animal husbandry, and because we had the last week when the children were celebrating my solar return, and a lot of this conversation came up, and there were some people also on the train that had mentioned that to me, asked me details on the animal husbandry. And so I decided to have a little bit of the conversation we had then, as well as a little bit of the conversation we had earlier today.
I just want to correct you. Mm-hmm. It wasn't last week. It was Tuesday.
Yeah, well.
Your solar return was just Tuesday.
Yeah, well.
A lot of y'all missed it, but we do have a video.
I'm thinking next week.
No, it was this week. Okay.
Week, early this week, pardon me.
Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah, earlier this week.
Right.
And I know a lot of times when we're mentioning different things, just like when we talk about the Organic Act of Congress, 1781, or we mention the Motu Proprio 2013, or we mention civil orders. Some people have reference to it and some people don't, so they'll hear us talking about that, and also the animal husbandry in the course of our conversations about other social engineering and social, political, economic matters operating at North America.
Well, I think it's interesting, something that you said when you said that the education system was another form of a caste system, because it's those with a degree versus those without a degree. And the truth be told, many people who go through college or higher education come out, at least these days, struggling to find jobs,
because
and
it's animal husbandry.
Right, they have not been properly, like you said,
they don't have erudition.
Right,
erudition is for humans.
But to those who did not go to college, they sometimes are looked down on with disdain. Oh, you didn't go to college. I have a degree, but you don't have a job.
That's part of the animal husbandry. See, that also creates a caste system,
right? And schisms between people.
Schism among the masses. And because of the ego and vanity being interjected with people who get degrees, you'll notice that you'll find that many people that get their so-called college degrees, right? If you'll notice that if they're not operating within the subjugated culture or jurisdiction of the corporate entities, that they're, for the most part, non-functional, meaning that they have no life skills whatsoever. And most of the time, if they're placed in a position in the corporate world, they need secondary training because the education they have really doesn't function.
Didn't prepare them for that.
Never does. It is already obsolete. This is back to people really not understanding. Like when you read that section, read that section again about the embryo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then analyze it.
It says,
we
shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply.
So now, the deal of it is the ample supply is really a caste. In other words, they're protecting their caste by eliminating via the education system competition and making the poor people pay for the education via taxation, and then taking up the best hours of their day, 9 to 5, so they have no time to actually develop even on their own. Then forcing the mothers, forcing them to send their children to the animal husbandry training camps called schools.
Dumbing them down.
From the door. And they would even, and you don't see the practice so much as you used to, even had truant officers that would actually punish parents if their children weren't sent to the animal husbandry camps. But the issue is that the major issue is that the people, many people even to today, don't even know that the Board of Education are animal husbandry camps. They think that they're actually places for erudition for human development. They're not. They're animal husbandry camps.
And I called you a polymath the other day. And for those, and we talked about that in terms of, I mentioned it today about abundance child.
Mm-hmm.
And a polymath, it says, is an individual whose knowledge spans a substantial number of subjects, known to draw on complex bodies of knowledge to solving specific problems. And I see you and others I've met, and you don't have a college degree. Am I correct?
No, I left out of school 10th grade.
So yeah. So the thing, it is not in those, some of the folks with the most skill and the most ability to think outside the box and be creative and just to be fluid in what they do have not gone through that whole matrix system.
They're less contaminated.
Absolutely.
And also people are not aware, have not been aware of the fact that the general education animal training camps were actually what they are, animal husbandry camps. But by telling them or training them that this was education implied for human development and excellence, they believed that. And then, of course, they were pretty much forced to go in the first place. And so they had no idea. Even people today have no idea, as a general rule, that is actually a military social engineering weaponization system. Because if they call it what it really is, animal husbandry training camps, then logically the people would recognize that it's actually a form of genocide. And if you analyze the philosophy page, which is public knowledge, they're admitting to the genocide. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we would mention to the people, even when they got the flash drive, to read the General Education Board, so that their state of mind would be corrected. And although they were being and are being oppressed via the corporate operatives of the municipalities, via the Circle Church and Chancery, they would take more serious charge of their children when they get home, to start producing or giving them more erudite knowledge and reestablishing libraries in their homes with the older books, and actually start training their children. This is, again, and you notice that over the years, when women and men started giving their children erudite learning home, that they were being attacked by the corporate state. Yes. And sometimes they would even steal the children from the homes so that the parents could not teach the children. Now, also, while we're talking about this, I want all of you who are sharing this with us tonight here at the House of Reawakening Minds, look up and print off and put it in a folder so that you can remind yourselves. The Convention on Genocide, and pay attention to every point made. And what you should do is start charging these people of the municipalities across the land who have been running the genocide program of the animal husbandry training via the General Education Board 1902 and start charging them with causing injury to your children. And once you see how broad the charges are on genocide, it probably surprised you. It would probably surprise you to recognize that they were genociding you right to your face. And no one has been making any claims. Like you'll see here and there, some parents who figured out that they were actually abusing their children even went through the trouble of suing the members of the General Education Board. What their approach would be to try to sue the corporate entity and not necessarily name living men and women. And so they've been getting away with the genocide operations of the General Education Board for decades.
Do you want me to share some of the?
Yes.
Want me to bring it up or read it?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, Article 2 of the Convention defines the crime of genocide to mean any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, Planned Parenthood. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And this is from what is the Genocide Convention that you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and that was like 1948, 1947,
Yes.
48, 1948.
Now, and they've been doing it for actually the last couple of centuries. I think another thing that you need to look up is how many children they have murdered over the years of the Aboriginal and Indigenous people over the years to also control, quote unquote, as they have said, the livestock. And also for many parents who had been teaching their children, and their children were using critical thinking when they went to the different institutions, educational institutions that they were forced to go in, and the children would disappear. And you'll find many of the churches around the country and from Canada, and mainly Canada and under U.S. corporation jurisdiction, that actually thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of children have disappeared and have been actually murdered via these camps.
They just found like mass graves, like what, last year? Or they announced it last year in Canada.
It's one of many. And most people, and you'll notice that almost all of those institutions that were used in order for them to remove the children from their families and put them in the hands of the corporate states, etc., was done under the guise of education or under the guise of Christianization. But most of these, and then when you look at, even when people are looking at what you just stated, a lot of our people through their animal husbandry training would start talking about the Carlos Linnaeus and Blumenbach race theories instead of talking genocide. And so that is part of the miseducation too. For their argument would go against, or what you go against, empty ears, or go into the void because the argument was totally incorrect. So the people would argue about racism relative to the inner city schools and everything, when they actually should have been and should be arguing genocide and not naming the corporate entity known as the General Education Board, but naming the living men and women who've been administering it. Concepts have been wrong on many fronts. And part of these things we were talking about, earlier this week, and also with a few people as I've traveled, and as we had started some of the conversation earlier tonight, before we even started loosely and casually discussing the weaponization of the General Education Board. And people need to know that they are, in fact, in fact, animal husbandry training camps. Absolutely. Constructed for the purpose and the function of executing the unum sanctum genocide ongoing against the indigenous people. That's a fact. Now, use this knowledge to start bringing remedy. And as you know, Dr. G, you know that a lot of the institutions are collapsing.
Yes.
Now, when you do research, you'll recognize that, particularly since, say, 1933, when many of the nation states around the world who had in their treasuries usually 50 to 55% of their reserve currency with U.S. corporation treasury bonds, etc. And as you know, in these last decades, they've been dumping U.S. Treasury bonds, which has much to do with the politics that you see going on now with the trade wars, etc. People need to know that. And then after they stopped accepting the Treasury bonds and the marriage certificates that they fractionalized to fund the corporate entities, etc. Then in 33. As you already know, what's his name? Franklin Delano Roosevelt used the birth certificates to refund or reinvigorate the stock market. And of course, in these of the last maybe 15 years, many people have become aware of the birth certificates being used to fund the bankrupt U.S. corporation, but they were not aware of the marriage certificates that were used prior to that were also being rejected by the nation states. And so it's important for people to have a recognition that things that for the most part they thought were totally disconnected, the education board, the marriage certificate, the birth certificate, in their minds, there's no relationship. It's all tied together. And then you notice the John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, and people see that Gates name and the Gates Foundation, and many people don't tie together the relationship to this very day of them doing certain things to maintain docility with their livestock. Now you understand, while as they've been deliberately dumbing the children down, they used the weaponized pharmaceutical system to actually introduce the children into drugs right through the school systems. In other words, they would dumb the children down. They would give them things in their bloodstream that create different titles that they would give. They would always come up with different names.
ADHD,
yes.
ADD,
yes.
and all of these attention deficit disorders,
and so then drug them. Keep this in mind. So they have ordinary nurses in the schools who are actually agents for the pharmaceutical companies, which is absolutely part of the military operation started around 1942 to actually keep the people in a state of docility. And if the children were critical thinkers, they would drug them.
My son, one of my sons, my middle son, he'll be 48 this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it like it was yesterday when they recommended that Ritalin. And that stuff, was like, that was like the downer for school. And then when you got him home, then you had to deal with the fallout
exactly
of that. And then I just recently saw somebody did a video or something sent to me where I think I sent it to my son because it showed that the Ritalin, I think it was the Conjure Queen. The Conjure Queen talked about the fact that those things like Ritalin and I don't know whatever else, because 40 some years ago with him, it was Ritalin, but that they knew that they were targeting these children that were probably very intelligent, very likely to change the world and everything. And those are the children they targeted.
if the children showed any sign of genius,
Yeah.
if they showed any sign of critical thinking, if they showed any sign of disinterest in the animal husbandry training, they would drug them and force the parents to accept that their children would be drugged. And the parent would not be aware that this is actually set in the philosophy to keep them docile and actually to suppress genius.
Mhm.
All of this done in the name of education and the people being trained to believe that the education would be in the line of erudition, which it is not.
And the other thing that they would do is they will reward the school for as many of them as they could identify there. They got extra funds
For that. As a matter of fact,
Just like folks got extra funds 2 years ago for that.
Yes.
You know, that other thing.
yes,
That's the same thing they did.
yes, and it's the same Gates family that through the military operations of the pharmaceutical operation of the congressional industrial military complex that are doing things to the children even to this day and banning anyone to talk about it. Same thing. It's genocide.
Yeah. It is.
You know, which we can't make certain direct statements.
We can on our own channel.
Well, you know, but you already know what that's about.
I know.
Now, not knowing, and one of the things that is of interest, Dr. J, is that the average everyday man and woman were going about their everyday business, trying to live and trying to sustain, and others just trying to stabilize their families, have no idea that the General Education Board is actually animal husbandry training camps, and that it's actually weaponized, and it's actually connected to every other section of the economic social structure. It would never dawn on them that they were actually being prepared as workers for the corporation, not as thinkers. And this is again why the children are attacked or drugged when they see that they have any sense of genius. But most children who have sense of genius, it kind of already sense that the education system is BS. They kind of recognize it. They just don't have the sophistication to recognize that they're being attacked, but they can sense it. That's why they drug them.
Let me share something else back with the Board of Education. There's a quote in here, and I don't know if some of you have pulled up the same thing, but it says, in many cases, and it's what you said, independent thinking and higher ambitions were completely squashed. There's a famous story about the young Malcolm Little, who would later become Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. He heard his teacher tell the white students in his class that they can be whatever they wanted to be. He was at the top of his class and was looking for encouragement on pursuing law as a career. He tells his teacher what he wants to be, a lawyer, and was told that his dream is unrealistic and that he should work with his hands, maybe be a carpenter. And in young women, I know a lot of times when women, particularly women, said, you know, I want to be this or that, they were encouraged back then. Home ec is good, but learn how to sew, learn how to cook, learn how to be a good wife and mother. And so a lot of women were discouraged even by teachers to not look outside of the domestic arena for anything to do outside of their, you know, educational system. Mm-hmm. Do you see that was also a part of the limiting, because there came to be many great inventions and so forth. Now that I'm looking back, that our women, and they say necessity is the mother of invention. So I believe a lot of our women were like, there's got to be a better way to do this. I'm not going to break my back doing this. So they were developing ironing boards and brooms and different mm-hmm. things that did things that made life easier. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the patents even were stolen.
Almost all of them were. And very few benefits were ever passed down through the estates. And again, this is why trust in the estates or estate was never taught to the people either. And again, recognizing that the system itself of animal husbandry is the education system is actually weaponized. The major, it can't be emphasized enough that the people need to know, even though it's direct, but somewhat worded in such a way not to be as offensive as it actually is, directly in the philosophy page, that it is indeed weaponized. It is clearly weaponized. And now, and most people, and I think a lot of times because people don't have an Edamon degree, that they're looking at these words mostly from a connotative perspective. So when you look at animal husbandry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their idea of husband is, a man married to a woman and is the male side of the mate in marriage. They don't look at it as economic management and cultivation of animals and breeding and agriculture. They don't look at it as farm operations. So even when you look at the philosophy, when they tell you they're going to keep these people doing imperfectly, as perfectly what their parents are doing or have been doing imperfectly, which means they're deliberately teaching them falsely, not accidentally, and it's absolutely weaponized. Again, whenever analyzing this, or even some of you who are listening to our broadcast here tonight at the House of Reawakening Minds, please read the philosophy page and read the convention on the crime of genocide next to each other. And if you really love your children and you want to so-called begin to help fix the communities and the women coming together for the sake of helping the community, not knowing this or not approaching this intelligently with charges of genocide would be irresponsible, and also would be a very important missed opportunity for cure. And it's back to, when you understand the weaponization of this whole matter, that energy we can reduce wasted energy. Like when people come together to help the community and they sit around, they have meetings trying to figure out what they should do or what they should talk about to help the children. And something so simple that's been in front of their faces for all their lives, as what we're talking about tonight, is rarely addressed, except from an emotional perspective. And they'll talk about the children being handicapped in school and thinking it's an attitude, not knowing that the education system itself is a weapon. It's another reason we're having this conversation, because they need to be focused on that it was and is. It didn't fall. It didn't become broke. It was weaponized from its inception. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people, it doesn't dawn on people that it's a weapon, because they think a lot of the problems that they are discovered in the education system were evolutionary developments, or interjections over a period of years, not knowing that from its inception, it is itself a weapon. Yes, yeah. Absolutely is.
It's all deceptive. I was looking at Netflix, I think it's called African Queen series. And so they had one on this queen in Jinga, not in Zinga, in Jinga. I don't know whether she was real or whether it was fictitious. But the interesting part of it was that what do they call it? The Portuguese.
Mm-hmm. Portuguese.
So the Portuguese were trying to, what they basically wanted was them to submit to Christianity, to give away
for the same operation.
Yeah, whatever their customs were, whatever their religious practices were, and then they did it. They said priests and they said whatever Capuchin monks and so forth. But they also always did it at the end of a sword. And that's what I said. Most of conversions back then, and even, you don't see a real sword now, but they happened at the end of a sword. Mm-hmm. They were killing thousands upon thousands and enslaving thousands upon thousands, not necessarily bringing them to America, but they were being used by the Portuguese as part of the slave trade. But they wanted them to give us your people, and then also give us your heart, your mind, your culture, and everything, and because we got the best thing going.
That's part of the unum sanctum operations, and this is back to like people not knowing or looking at these different aspects of the social structure as being separate, not recognizing that all of these things were component parts of the doctrine of discovery and the unum sanctum operations, even to this day. So like a lot of the people, when they're looking at the social problems and the economic problems, particularly plaguing our communities, they'll immediately go to the Carlos Linnaeus and Blumenbach argument of phenotype under the guise of racism, and none or very few would ever even mention the doctrine of discovery and the unum sanctum operations, thinking that that's past tense and it has no connection. All they did was change different names of the aspects of the same operation to this day, which is i.e. General Education Board, 1902. The refunding of the United States Corporation, 1932, 1933. The meeting on Jekyll Island, 1913.
On land where they massacred our people, they built Jekyll Island.
Yes.
And then
and most people don't. It never dawns on people if you mention the Circle Church in Chancery, if you mention Fleet Street, England. It doesn't even dawn on them that the entire judicial operations operating on the land in North America, called your different municipal courts, right around the corner here and elsewhere, is run from Fleet Street, England. To this very day, they don't know that. And they have no idea that the General Education Board, docile weaponry training with all of these people here who are paying for it in their taxes,
absolutely,
from their houses for their own genocide. And who would think that this was all connected, Dr. J? As we're having this conversation about the animal husbandry weaponization, most people would take it, as this particular aspect of conversation that's totally being separate from even income tax, the tax on their homes, the largest of the tax on their homes. Do you understand how egregious that actually is? That these people are actually forced. The largest tax on their home property is presented or imposed for the General Education Board, which is a weaponized system for genocide. Which is really part of the point that I'm making. So that people can start being more critical in their analysis, and that they can start thinking for themselves and recognize that when they're sitting around marching around the place complaining about attitudes and racism, that is part of the misdirection. They should be talking genocide. They should be studying all aspects of genocide. Their meetings should be coming together, charging the people who are running the municipalities with genocide in their private as well as official capacities. And the corporate entities that they're operating through should be secondary. Point made.
Yeah, but there's just so many variables, and people think, they think that it's real. They think the government, there's still too many that believe that the government is looking out for the best interests. I'll see how they can over the last 2.5 years, but there's too many people that see things, through rose-colored glasses. They don't see things how they really are.
Now, isn't that back to the Organic Act of Congress 1871? Isn't that back to people? It doesn't dawn on people that these people who they've been telling or thinking or being trained in the animal camps was their government. You see it? See the connection? See the animal husbandry weaponization that the people in their own mind have been funding supporting, voting for, and calling the weaponized order their own government, and therefore training their children in docility, thinking that these people were their constitutional government order, all of which they are not and have not been. And they themselves have been funding their own genocide and calling it racism, even after being presented with proof. So you can see the mind control, even the MK Ultra, what they call the Stockholm Syndrome, and a lot of other things.
But isn't that what government
The mind.
means? It means controlling the mind.
Now,
So if somebody else is your government, the first government should be but yourself.
not just that, but when you're saying whenever you're saying possessive, that's an affirmation of sanction in trust. You should never call them our government. You should never call them the government. You should refer to them as the de facto U.S. circle, church, and chancery occupying government body, but never attach it to yourself. And this is back to the animal husbandry training, because the people can't see, even after being dispensed the information, that these people are not government. So, and it's sort of like when we were talking earlier on the phone, you'll say de facto and de jure relative to aspects or the nature of government. And people will say they're de facto and still don't get or dawn on them what de facto actually means. That means imposters. That means active, in fact, but not legitimate. When the people would refer to these people in the so-called de facto government agencies as officer, that implies that they're constitutional, and none of them are constitutional. Therefore, that you should never call any of them officers. You see the psychosis. You see the animal husbandry training. This is again why it's difficult a lot of times when you're trying to get people to use critical thinking to start bringing remedy to themselves. When you see people who have been claiming to be constitutional officers and they're not, and they've been abusing the people and taxing the people while abusing them, and the people are seeking remedy and they keep having difficulty because they keep saying my government, my congressman, my officer, the law officer, etc. And none of these people are officers. Officer implies an elected, constitutionally elected being with specific delegated authority under what is known as a quo warranto, or delegation of authority order via constitutional appointment with limited delegated, clearly spelled out authority with a beginning, or what you call an initiation date and a termination date, always being vetted by constitutional limitations. Only at that time would you refer to them as officer. But that the fact that the people keep calling them officers is part of the animal husbandry training from childhood. And so this is, Dr. G, even when you see people, adults who in their concept of thinking have a so-called degreed education, it makes it very difficult for them to solve their economic and political problems when they come together in organized bodies, politics, and start addressing the problems of the community. Even remember, when we were even around, Drop Squad Kitchen, and you all discussing a lot of work that you've been doing across the country with a lot of women and other organizations of women who made contact with you, including Abundance Child, and she's discussing things
with Order Mother.
All now when they're coming together And so you're dealing with people with good intention, right? Think about this. With good intention and a lot of your energy coming together with goodwill, you will approach a lot of moral and ethical issues, and never dawn on you that a lot of your holdup or burnt energy will be predicated on people having an education system or education that is under animal husbandry and not being aware of it. And so while you're seeking to do certain things to progressively, you'll find and never dawn on you that a lot of the progress that could be and should be made is predicated on an expectation of rational thinking, and 90% of the people will be operating with that animal husbandry training camp mentality. Nothing wrong with them intellectually by nature, but having an animal husbandry education, which is a weapon against themselves. And then you'll recognize why it's so difficult if you notice when people come together to try to solve problems, and they'll meet and have more meetings, and meet and have more meetings. And after a couple of months or a couple of years, they fall apart and it goes nowhere. And no one, and some of them will get into schisms, and it'll never dawn on them that they've been operating with animal husbandry training, meaning that their reference points are corrupted from almost every point. And that's again how if you present some of the statements that were made by people who they have assumed were their government, etc., and then always keep in mind the philosophy of the General Education Board, etc., and also the Convention on Genocide, and put that together, and then make sure everybody in the group has those documents in a folder before them as they begin to think, analyze, and plan in their organized groups, that this would keep them focused. It would also make them aware of their own flawed thinking and make them open to more critical analysis of things, and on the long run would make them more capable of solving the problems that they seek to solve. And of course, you're going to run into controversy automatically, because they're going to recognize so much of, and so many of their concepts or thought patterns must be actually dumped and discarded. And of course, that would make a lot of people uncomfortable. However, if you're going to make progress with people who have been suffering unknown to themselves under animal husbandry, weaponized education system, if you're not aware of it, logically they're going to fall victim. And this has been a pattern. And so being aware of it gives you a sort of like a forewarning, and it gives you a basis for critical thinking and a point of reference to help you in your shadow work. That's a fact. Was there any? I don't think there's so much questions as I think that people would have certain things to add.
People have comments, and there are some comments, and people are. I did highlight a couple.
Also, when it comes to the people coming together and also raising funds for their little organizations, for the people to start taking responsibility of their own affairs, etc., it would be helpful, again, for them to start applying critical thinking as that being sort of like a big poster on the wall to keep them focused, absolutely focused on what all of us have been subject to, and that their children are subject to. Because keep in mind, when it comes to critical thinking, Dr. G, uh, contrary to what many people would be aware of on the surface, a lot of their difficulty of reasoning with people when they're trying to solve problems, it never dawns on them that they're dealing with animal husbandry that has been weaponized in the education system, which is why a lot of times common sense things don't come out or manifest when people come together to try to solve their community operations or any organizations that the people set up for themselves. Also, that animal husbandry training has allowed the politicians who know that the people are under animal husbandry or training camps, know that the people could be fooled constantly, and that they could give them pacified or what you call, you know, like when politicians talk to people, they talk like down to them like they're children. They make them a bunch of promises that even the dog listening knows that they're not going to carry out. And yet the people continue year after year after year after year dealing with these people and the programs that they set up. And it never dawns on them that these politicians are agents to the animal husbandry training camps.
And they're the ticks. What do they say? Politics means many bloodsuckers. And they're, like you said,
they are
exactly
ticks.
what they are.
They are ticks.
Exactly what they are. Do you want to take a couple of, let me put up a couple of comments, like questions? Okay, here's the first one that I had highlighted back at the time. This is from Diana Frazier. I've heard it said or read male, female only applies to animals. Feminine, masculine differentiates mankind from animals. Is it true?
Well, in general, yes.
Okay. So when they talk about, I guess they have. All right. Okay, here's another one I put there. Brother Zero. Question: what would happen if we send our certificates of birth and SSNs back?
Now, listen to this statement. I'm going to show you animal husbandry. Repeat that statement slowly.
I know it's the word like hour.
You got it?
See
now,
it? I see it. Okay.
Now.
What?
No.
I know what you're going to say.
Let
possessive.
Because we're identifying.
Yes.
What we need to do is get the people to be more self-aware that when you're trying to solve problems, how the weapon is projected by you yourselves. So if the intended question is for cure and you interject the weapon, it's called the trap. It's called the wrench in the gears. And what you want to do, though we're going to answer to it because we know what it's intended to do, we want to be self-aware. As soon as you say our, right? Number one, it's not your instrument. It doesn't belong to you. You didn't create it. It's an instrument attached to the Sister QV Trust, run by the field officers known as Circle Church and Chancery. That would be your Sadducees and Pharisees, known as your bar association members, attorneys, esquires, and lawyers who answer to the members of the Roman Curia via the Circle Church and Chancery, Fleet Street, England, answering to the Queen of England and her staff, answering to the Pope of Rome, who controls the World Global Trust. When you say our possessive, you have just sanctioned it in what you call oral trust agreement. So you undermine your intended meaning. However, we know where you're coming from. However, it's not yours. It's sort of like if me and you were right now talking about Michael Jackson's song or something, On Bad, his album or something like that. And you say, oh man, I like that album. I like that. Oh, I'm going to sing that and everything. And you're going to say, that's mine because I grew up on that song and stuff like that, right? Well, guess what? It's copyrighted. It's not yours.
Right.
You have no right to it. Even though your name might be Michael. And what our people don't know in contract law, right?
Mhm.
This is why it's important for people to know basic etymon and basic jurisprudence or basic grammatication. And also why the people, most of the people you find, even they themselves cognitively don't trust themselves when it comes to contracts. They'll even pay another man or woman to, in the name of lawyer or attorney, to look over contracts because they don't even trust themselves reading it because they know intrinsically that they have been miseducated. So they don't even trust their education themselves, right? However, it's back to the issue of the animal husbandry training. Why do they have to depend on a member of the Circle Church and Chancery? Because the Circle Church and Chancery is part of the order that put this corruption together in the first place. And it never dawns on you that your lack of grammatical skills was constructed by these very people that you're so-called paying to look at before you sign contracts, not knowing that you're already under contracts. And so when you assume, and this is based on people who found out, this question, Dr. J, is based on people who recently found out what we've been knowing for decades about the birth certificate being used in the 30s when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when the United States Corporation Company went bankrupt again after 25, and they used the birth certificates, which we talked about earlier, to refund the bankrupt corporate United States company that the people still at that time and now keep thinking is a country. They think it's a country because they're under animal husbandry that has been weaponized. They don't even know that their own mind is MK Ultra. And therefore their language reflects that. It's not your birth certificate. It's a bottomry instrument that's on the stock market with allonges attached to it. And they have what you call 12 districts of routing for the operations of the livestock, known as the different regencies of the IRS. And these instruments go through routing numbers, which are on a QSIC number, which is the red number on the backside of the Social Security instrument, which is also not yours. It's a Sister QV trust, not yours. It's all capital letters, but it's attached so that they can teach you to associate it and say mine. And when you say mine possessive, it implies a trust statement to the Sister QV trust. And therefore, they're saying that you are sanctioning your own servitude or you're consenting. It is not yours, it's theirs. And in the rule of fraud, you must refute the fraud. You can't seek to get a benefit from it. And if you recognize a fraud, you must declare that it's a fraud because the liability becomes yours. This is how they've been also putting the debt on you and claiming their private corporate debt as, quote unquote, your national debt, though they themselves, as FOFers, are not the nation. They're doing it under trust law. And you've been supporting it under animal husbandry, weaponized thinking. Therefore, your statements come under animal husbandry construct. And they call it connotative linguistics. And so when you make reference to the instrumentalities created under the Circle Church and Chancery, you're trained from childhood to keep saying mine, my marriage certificate, my license, my birth certificate. And you just made a trust statement. And it's called slavery by consent.
Does it even compare? Does it even refer to Social Security?
So my Social, all of the Social Security started even after Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when their corporation went bankrupt in the 30s. They call it the bank holiday, and this is where they the members of the Circle Church and Chancery via Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Skull and Bones, as the administrative head, actually made it a crime for the people to hold any constitutional operations of gold or silver and stole it from the people, literally under threat of arrest, etc., to fund their private corporate debt, and then list it back to the people under the birth certificate. And when people became aware of the birth certificate bond, and you notice how lately people keep talking about the birth certificate, but you don't hear none of them talking about the marriage certificate or the licenses. All of them are derivatives. All of them, you know, it's sort of like, I think a lot of people are emphasizing the birth certificate that the people found out, so they don't pay attention to that the marriage certificate superseded them. And everybody that's been married don't even know that all of their estates had already been sanctioned and auctioned off on the stock market, which is why most of our people don't have an inheritance to leave to their children. And it never dawns on them that's been weaponized too. Now that the people woken up, they keep emphasizing the birth certificate because they don't want you to recognize they've already done it with the marriage certificates before the birth certificates. Birth certificates are secondary. You know, it's sort of like now that the people found out that the politicians have been stealing the cookies, they're talking about the box of cookies that they're stolen so that you don't recognize they stole the field and the factory before that. And they'll sort of focus on the birth certificate so you don't pay attention to all the other corruption that's bigger than that and superseded that, which include the marriage certificate. This is why people who are conscious don't go to the corporate state for a marriage certificate. Knowing as soon as you get the marriage certificate, you become ships in the night. You become secondary and third parties to the contract. The corporate states become the first head and first holder in due course of the estate, which is why when you notice how, like, say, some people can get so-called married and you make a little bit of plans, you spend a few thousand notes for your so-called marriage celebration, and no matter what the cause, infidelity or any other problems, and you notice how when they so-called get divorced, that it's harder to get divorced than it was to get married, and all of a sudden the state is in all your business and they're probating every piece of property you have, and for you to even break up, even they'll pit you against each other, the men and women against each other. And the corporate state, through the Bar Association, will steal sometimes a third up to half of the state with litigation. And you know why they're able to do that? Because they're the first party in the marriage certificate, corporate state is. They own the estate first. So they ain't going to tell you that, are they? Are they? They be telling you that, oh, the marriage is before God of Jesusness of the Lord. And people think that that's some kind of holy stuff. No, it's not.
Yeah, it's
a bottomry instrument.
When I did marriages, it was now the first party was by the state of Delaware. You know, I mean, like, no, God's was first. God and the state of Delaware. So the state of Delaware or the state of New Jersey or wherever is spoken into, you know, those the vows. You know,
it's a contract.
The ceremony.
It's contract. Yeah.
You know, like, what should the state have to do with it?
What do the now look at this, just like you said. Look, what do the Skull and Bones members say from the pit? They say from the pit, by the powers vested in me by the state of Delaware, I pronounce you man and wife. Now, what did they tell these people in the animal husbandry training? There's a separation of church and state. Yeah. The people have a state of mind that does not exist, that is totally contrary. They go to these people, and the corporate state, this is what the corporate state holds. It holds the femi, i.e. female, i.e. as heifers. The corporate state own the heifers. They have them for sale. The marriage certificate is a sale instrument of their chattel, which is French for cattle, and they sell them. Therefore, they have first claim on the womb. That's where the birth certificate comes in. The marriage certificate covers the eggs, i.e. the unhatched eggs. And therefore, the female heifer is rented conditionally to whoever the bidder would be. So the bidder, that's a B-I-D-D, comes thinking that he's getting a wife, and he becomes husband. Does not know that the claim on the estate and the management of that estate of both the livestock of them and the children, there's your Christian Black Codes, 1724, Article 6.
That was a question. Are they still in effect today?
They've never not been in effect. Why do you think they will not allow women to go home without signing a birth certificate, and literally have held women in arrest in hospitals who tried to take their children home without signing a birth certificate? It's in the people's face, the animal husbandry, and they still don't get it because they keep thinking these people are constitutional government. They're human traffickers, never have not been that. It's that the people have been trained under animal husbandry, and mentally, this is the order that they've been groomed to, so they don't question it. We're even having this conversation to get people to start questioning things, to start using their common sense. Because, it's like this. A lot of the liberation that must take place with humanity cannot take place until they themselves become mentally liberated. In other words, you can't liberate a people who don't know they're slaves.
It's true.
Really. Because they will argue their animal husbandry education to defend their position, then fund it under taxation with the Sister QV Trust, and say my birth certificate, my taxes, and even where they domicile in their houses under mortgages and deeds contrary to what? Allodial title or aboriginal title, their biggest tax for the homes that they stay in goes to the General Education Board for the genocide operations of the Doctrine of Discovery under animal husbandry training camps, known as the General Education Board 1902. And we're talking basically intelligent people that could have really generally intelligent conversations until you give them a mirror and show them the truth that they're dealing with animal husbandry. Now, look at this again, and this is even back to the issue with the birth certificate, Dr. J. And this is where people have been selling people the paradigm of quote unquote claiming holder in due course of the birth certificate and therefore becoming executor holder in due course and therefore becoming holder of the birth certificate and the allonges that go with it, which would then recapture also the CUSIC number and will reverse all of the trade that's been done with all the corporations around the world with their whole lifespan, with all the allonges.
So would those be
under the guise of that birth certificate, and they're looking at that instrument of the birth certificate. Never dawned on them that you must have all the allonges that go with it your whole lifespan.
Are those the derivatives that have gone?
This is where if somebody puts in a social security number and they'll find all the lists of all the corporations that are doing business, whether they're in the living body or not.
Oh, GMEI.
Those are allonges. They're allonges.
thousands sometimes.
No, it'd be a book. It would be a book that can only be kept digital. And the fact that even as we're having this conversation, it even gets deeper and more broader than people would think, which is really why we're having this conversation, really to get people started doing some critical thinking, so that the energies that our people shall be and will be spending with each other, coming together, trying to counter the unum sanctum wars against us that has been actually institutionalized and disguised under the captive title of racism and prejudice, which is a diversion, and that the people would put their energy in civil rights arguments. This is what this whole civil rights argument has been, 14th Amendment. This is why it has nothing to do with living people. When they talk about the 14th Amendment being a corporate entity, so can the living speak to the dead?
Nope.
This is why U.S. citizens can't debate. So here are people who discover the bottomry instrument about the birth certificate. Never dawns on them that the marriage certificates supersede that from their parents, and that they've already been sold as livestock.
Let me bring this up. Let me share this. Got so many things open. Where are you? There's a. Okay, I'll bring this up. Present. Share screen.
I can't understand what you're saying.
No, there's a website out here. Here we go. Let me share it. It says, here it is. It says, use this website utility to see yourself being traded as cattle. Absolute proof. And they've got, it's the GMEI utility, which currently is for some reason down. It's under. They're doing something to it. I guess too many people are gone on it. But basically, here's what they say. You are traded as cattle, and here is proof. And then it's showing. I've seen this for my own stuff. I've seen this. I've seen this. These things for my mother. At the time when I found out about it, my mother.
Clear that up, because you can back up and clear that up. What you're presenting, so that people can be clear.
Okay, so there is a website which probably some of you may be aware of, and it's gmeiutility.org. This particular website is by Timothy Charles Holmseth reports, and he's saying use this website, the GMEI utility, which if you click on it right now, it's going to tell you they're under maintenance or something. Use this website facility to see yourself being traded as cattle. Absolute proof. And when you go to the site, you put the social security assigned that you have. They have put
that they've
you,
assigned
against you. You put that in without the dashes.
Yes.
And you click search, and it brings up all like these. What it's showing here. And my mother had been at that point, I think when I found out about it, had been deceased about 13 years. And I know her social, the social that was assigned to her, just like I know the one they assigned to me. And I put it in, and they were still trading, and they are to this day. My mother transitioned in 2002.
Now, what does that demonstrate? The people's concepts of life and death in the corporate government structure is not and has never been what they think it is or thought it was. Why? Animal husbandry training, weaponized education, and the incapacity to apply elementary, fundamental, basic critical thinking. In other words, they are docile livestock and didn't know it because they were trained from childhood.
Yeah, there's so many things though that we were not aware of, and then as we've come into this knowledge that people like yourself have shared with us, then we become aware. The problem, as you said, is many of us have been trained and indoctrinated in such a way that when it's in our face, we don't believe it.
And will defend the system and fund it.
Right.
but yet not want the injury that comes with it. Now look at this, Dr. J. Would come together in organizations, right? Assemble. Try to get people of like mind, have meetings, fund organizations to deal with the symptoms and not knowing the eventual circle that they would be going in around the bush or on the treadmill with good intentions and constantly casting spells on ourselves through connotative linguistics with the intent of trying to solve problems, not knowing that they would be using connotative linguistic designed from childhood with animal husbandry, weaponized education, and having limited to no other reference points in order to cure or to solve problems. Therefore, by default, forcing them by default to, again, after frustrating themselves, dealing with other people having animal husbandry training, to resubmit themselves to the priesthood via pseudo de facto government agency operatives to so-called solve their economic, social, and spiritual problems, which will never be solved. It's a weapon.
Mhm.
But we're analyzing this so that people can take a look at it. You know, we're doing a logistical breakdown in a sense, Dr. G,
Mhm.
to also to see how broad reaching it is and how it's interconnected with the entire economic, social, and political structure. Absolutely. And people would think that it was a separate issue, wouldn't they? Just like people think that when they left school, they left school. Or that when they paid for a degree, that they accelerated above the operative farm.
No, then you gotta keep
They
on paying.
jumped the hoop better. They paid to jump the hoop better. And then you can also see why people who mean well and come together to try to solve the economic and social problems that are evolved within the communities, why they have limited to no success, and actually after months and sometimes years in organized groups, they just simply frustrate themselves and the organized operations dissolves because it goes nowhere. And it never dawns on them that they're operating from corrupted perspectives. And this is what, you know, even when you look at this operation, now you understand, again, the motive of the hybrid Europeans operating here on the land, why they spent so much time burning books and also reconstructing history. They call it reconstruction. And people keep thinking they're reconstructing buildings from war and stuff. No, they were reconstructing the fundamental institutions of erudition, turning them into institution of animal husbandry camps under the guise of education. And creating what? Workers, not thinkers.
That was the first level robot we had to make it. First gen. Now they're going like, well, we got to get a little bit more AI in this.
That's why they're doing it.
They need them artificial because
part of it. You know, even like you think about it, Dr. J. Even most intelligent people, you know, remember this, say maybe 30 some odd years ago, right? Right? And many of the listeners aren't even that old. But just think 30 years ago, you had almost a whole phone book in your mind, remembering phone numbers.
That's right.
Now, numbers you use every day, you may remember 5 of them, sometimes forgetting your own phone number now because we've been AI'd.
And that's what I've been doing, personally trying to remember numbers and dial them instead of looking for the name. Because what happens when they take that away?
It's part of which they intend to do, which is why they're trying to look what is happening. You know the old rule when we tell people to deal with constitutional principles, and the Constitution, say as an example, Article 1, Section 10, right? Relative to the operative state, corporate states, right? Says no state shall make anything but what? Gold coin, etc., etc. So gold, silver coin for payment of debt, right? Telling you what the money is. And yet, right in the face, that's Article 1, Section 10. They've actually trained the whole general body of people that the private vouchers of the Circle Church and Chancery, of the Federal Reserve Board, members of the Roman Curia who met on Jekyll Island 1913, the private commercial paper that belongs to them, they miseducated under animal husbandry the whole body of people that's money. And the whole body of people to this day think that that's money.
And the thing that baffles me is that all of this show, all of this trickery, all of this illusion, somebody actually they've been meeting to keep this whole charade going.
They have
for
international convention on education every year. International Convention on Education, where they meet and they plan what you call maintenance introduction of connotative linguistics in society, often referred to as fad language, in order to mitigate any what you call accelerating critical thinking of the people, to get us to habitually introduce to our children phrases and statements and words from a connotative perspective, or introducing what you will call clipped language, etc., that become part of the language form that actually maintains the animal husbandry under chattel livestock operations. And so, even a lot of your what they call new tech jargon is even part of that design. And so common sense is pretty much being groomed out of the people in the name of education. And because the education is not functional in reality, because by design it's obsolete, meaning that the goalposts are already points of obsolescence. As an example, like say for instance, when you're looking at, say, part of the animal husbandry training now with transportation, right? And they're talking about electric cars, like it's something new, right? So the average person doesn't even think that in the late 1700s, they had electric cars. They had electric trains. Do you understand the built-in obsolescence? Mm-hmm. Now that for the education for these people now would be called new tech. That's 1700s. But the tech actually goes far beyond that, 1500s. But yet that information is blocked out. This is again why now you get into the Smithsonian Institute, etc., where they hide technical facts that these electric light bulbs and stuff that we think is new now, that was in the pyramids. So what's the big deal? But they hide that. And that technology goes back farther than that. And so the educations that are given to the people under animal husbandry is already obsolete. Now, when you read the philosophy page, you'll see where they say they're not looking for embryo. That means they're not going to feed the seed of anything that deals with human erudition. They will block it. They will neuter it. They will neutralize it. And they will organize the children in such a manner that it does not take root. And they will punish the parents if the parents don't participate. Then they will drug the children who try to get out of the fence. And that is the structure of the General Education Board.
Teach.
It is. And the interesting thing is obvious and not hidden in how many parents there have been a handful that have been countering, and they will be attacked by so-called politicians who care about the children, who want to protect the children. You see, the point that I'm making is that our energies have been misdirected on many levels. And the other interesting thing is that this is why, again, if people don't have a fundamental knowledge of law and history, that they're pretty much been neutered relative to any capacity to actually defend themselves and their families. They don't even know that they're actually helping to enslave their own families for generations. And when they have intentions of countering the injury that comes to them, they're actually using the weapon that was instilled within themselves. And so the outcome 80 to 90% of the time will be what? Failure and frustration. And so you can even see the schisms and the divisions that are among the common people in the communities. Its actual origin is the weaponized system of the General Education Board that they never suspected was a weapon and is a weapon. And because most people have been subjugated or subjected to it from childhood, most people don't even have a reference point to counter it. This is why, who's that said to Jolly? I think it was, Wilson said to Jolly, he says, as long as I got my schools and churches open, you won't get 500 to follow you. That was said to Noble Jolly when he charged them to restore the estates of the people with the old Canaanite temple.
Yeah, but that's not true. So that has proven to be a lie.
Yep. And it was because they're all weaponized. Yeah. And this is, and it's interesting, even when you do research, like in the 20s, even when, like say when Jolly, when they made them get the flag out the vault, right? And they brought the flag out the vault. I think it was in the 20s, in about 24, 25 in that area, right? And he told them to put the star back in because remember the treaty, etc. Because they're obligated by treaty and the ordinance of 1787. And of course they dumbed the people down, and so he seemed like an oddball, challenging them to bring the seal back out and also put the star back in the flag, etc. And they kind of mocked him, with the concept that he could give. Oh yeah, he said to give these people back Islam would be like putting a pair of pants on a horse. And I'll have to do the research to get the exact quote from the president saying that to draw a lady. But in spite of all of that infiltration and all the corruption, and in spite of a lot of the people still not getting a lot of concept information, this information that's spread around the world, and the world is no longer buying their bottomry instruments, which are known as birth certificates, CDLs, marriage certificates. They stopped doing that in the 30s, which is why they introduced the birth certificate to again refund the United States Corporation Company. And so now, they're dumping the treasury bonds. And I suggest that everybody listening here start looking up international law and the monetary systems, and you'll see that all the major nations of the earth are dumping U.S. treasury bonds. This is again while they're stealing your accounts, which we've been telling you for years that they were going to do. And this would be a signal when they start stealing your accounts and acting like people are hacking your credit cards and hacking your bank accounts and finances disappearing. No, that's a signal that the treasury bonds, which would be backing most of the different nations' reserve currencies for these last 50 some odd years that they would be dumping them. And so the corporate United States corporation company operatives are stealing from the people, and this is disguised under the word inflation. And then they would steal from the people and steal from the Sister QV trusts, etc. And they would send them to other countries in the name of helping other countries and to steal finance for themselves. So like as an example, so you see people all over the street in Philadelphia area, not so much in Delaware area because they don't allow it so much. But you'll see them have tents all over the place in Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all your major cities, New York, etc. And then they'll send multi-billions of dollars to Ukraine, to Israel, under the guise of helping them, etc., which is another indicator that they are aware of the fact that they don't present for these people here. They're actually just what they are, foreign corporate operatives of the Circle Church and Chancery who've been robbing the people here under the guise of, quote unquote, guise of being constitutional officers, and they are not, never were. And the people only believe it because they've been under animal husbandry training. And so this is, again, why a lot of times when we're having these subject matters, you'll see the people attack this information thinking you're trying to hurt them, and you're just simply telling them what the system is that they've been suffering from in the first place. And then most of the people who are assigned as their leadership in their different civic and religious organizations are themselves courier members, unbeknownst to the masses of the people. That's why most of them have a 501c3 skull and bones agreement, but that is never explained to the people that as a compromise contract. Or they try to mitigate it to being something else that it's not, knowing that most people don't have the operative capacity of critical thinking, that they would run to an emotional perspective presented to them by whoever's leading politically their associate groups and organizations, who for the most part are what? Trained under animal husbandry. And therefore they would have little contention or the capacity to contest because their concepts would be absolutely wrong. And then most of the people who are placed in leadership would have multi-degrees from the different so-called colleges and would assume that they're intelligent and capable of administering. Well, they are administering animal husbandry.
Okay.
Hmm?
We have 7 minutes. We have some things we need to say. I don't know where you are in your what you're sharing.
So these things, for the sake of tonight, because many of you are going to be discussing some of these things, and some of the people who would be asking questions recognize it's not necessary to answer questions. It's necessary for them to analyze what we talked about and start applying some of the things that they themselves already know. So look at the Convention on Genocide. Take the philosophy page of the General Education Board, put them together, study them together, study Constitution Ordinance of 1787, and put it together and give you some foundational reference points that will clear your mind and put your thinking on the right path, and you would reduce your wasted energy on frustrating activities of trying to bring people together to solve some of the social and economic problems with yourselves and with your children, not knowing that most of these people would be using by default their animal husbandry training that they got in the name of education and trusting their own thoughts that are really not their own thoughts. And so being aware of it, it's sort of like being aware of it gives you a point of reference so that you can do your own shadow work on yourself and be self-aware and start clearing up a lot of these misconceptions that all of us have been groomed under, and stop wasting your time on emotional and non-productive approaches to solving our economic and social organizational problems. And again, knowing that the people are under animal husbandry has much to do why most of your politicians and preachers have been absolutely arrogant in relating to the people, knowing that these people didn't even know what they were, how do you say, don't even know what they were talking about 90% of the time, because they don't even know that they're under animal husbandry. And so their arrogance and disdain and sometimes contempt in the way they would deal with the people is based on the fact that they knew the people under animal husbandry and the people didn't know. Anyway, hope this light conversation does some good and give you some reference points to look at, to do some reworking of the way you think about a lot of things, about institutions, and that you can ground yourself in more productive thinking and helping people around you to do some more productive thinking and come together with people of like mind, and let's start solving some problems. Yes, Dr. J.
So I want to thank you for a great build. A lot of comments. We could get to everybody's or comments or questions, but we do appreciate your being here. But I wanted to take the last few minutes, or even if I have to take an extra few minutes, Grand Sheik, if you don't mind, to talk about what we're doing. A couple weeks ago, we talked about that we were working on a website, or the website was being worked on because it was worked on by created by one sister. I want to give her a shout out. So I am so grateful we are to Sister LaChris out in Cali in Khalifa territory for the work that she is doing or has done. And y'all, we finally, since we're sharing, we have, can you see that? We have a website. And let me see if it's, you can't see that. I'm sorry. Let me present that. Share screen. All right. We have a website, and hopefully you see that. I'm bringing that up. So you can see that we actually do have a website. It is www.reawakeningminds. Let me make sure I can put this up here, right here. It's houseofreawakeningminds.com. Houseofreawakeningminds.com. We have a website, and what we're trying to do with this website, or having this website, again, like I said, shout out to Sister LaChris for the work that she's putting into this, her volunteer work. But I'm just kind of scrolling through so you can see some of what's on there. It is not complete, and what I'm saying is, under all of our categories, we don't have content, but we wanted to get it out here, get it up, because, for instance, here is the link to what you're looking at today. You can literally come back here instead of going to YouTube to click on and see what we're actually talking about today at this link. This is an upcoming event. Here's the link here for an upcoming event, March 17th through the 19th at the House of Reawakening Minds. If you want to register for that or learn more, click here and also register. Here's how you can order the 16 gigabyte drive, the US one or the international. And the reason why international, they're exactly the same drive. It just costs more to send things international. So don't put international if you're in the so-called continental United States. We have a place here where you can put your email address and subscribe to our upcoming newsletter and other things. And we have events here, latest videos. We have, let me see, what's here? Is anything under there yet? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the Real New Year's that's coming up. We have a lesson. Let me see if I don't know where it is. We have something coming up on next Tuesday. I think it's here, but if not, if you come on the website, you'll actually see it. I know she's putting it up when brother Rod Hayes is going to be doing Grand Sheik. He's going to be doing a one of our unfiltered on restoring tribal governance next Tuesday. But what you need to do is you need to register for that. So let me I'm showing you this so you, because a lot of y'all missed Grand Sheik's solar return on Tuesday, which we had an awesome a guest list. We had Brother Rod Hayes, we had Brother Dr. Botanica, Sister Cynthia Martin L, Mother Kai, who else we had? Abundance Child, Brother Raj Bey, Dr. Kia Pruitt. If you all want to see that, Brother Seton Ra and Sister Tia. So we had such a wonderful group that actually showed up on that. But if you want to actually come to the event on Tuesday, registration is free. But I'm showing you the link here, but on our website now, sorry for that noise in the background, but I can't believe how much noise is coming from one. Anyway, on the website, you'll be able to click on the link. You want to do that today and see if you can find it today and actually register. You will have to put your name and your email address in there, and then you will get a reminder. Maybe that's why you missed Grand Sheik's solar return, because I didn't have it so that you had to register. Well, you're going to have to register for this for Tuesday. We need to, we get your name and your email address. It does not go to anybody else. But if you want to be a part of this, and there's no cost, but you must register. And go to our website. We have a website, www.houseofreawakeningminds.com. We want you to know now. Go there every day, see what's going on, see what we've posted, see what you can. We're going to be putting content on there. We're going to have the links to the things that won't be on YouTube and won't be on Facebook, how you can get into it from there. We don't want to put everything on here, y'all. That's why we have to kind of censor our own selves about what we are talking about. And some of you have asked for our Cash App and other things, and I put it up there. But I also want to remind you that I posted this last week when I found out that somebody has made a fake Cash App with Dr. G official House of Reawakening Minds, and I don't know I can't see what the name is down here. That is not our Cash App. This thing, Dr. G official house, I have reported whoever did this. They're using they have our what do you call it? Logo, the one we use with the street sign. Yeah. They got Dr. G official house. So there's no way that this is accidentally somebody else. You can't use my logo and my name in the house, the name of our organization. You can't use that and say, oh no, no. I don't know who this is. I hope none of you have ever sent anything to these people right here, this Cash App. It is not ours. Well, it says Naila Gilliam and it says $ Reawaken. That is it. This thing right here is not our Cash App. So I've been posting the right one for a long time, but I'm grateful to the brother who was ordering a flash drive. And then he sent me this screenshot and said, which one is yours? I'm like, what do you mean, which one? And then I see this whole other one with Dr. G official house and the House of Rip. So, people can be so treacherous. Folks that look like us, but they're not us. So anywho, we just wanted to let you know that this is what's going on. Also, I also want to let you know, I'm going to put this up before we close out. I'm going to put this up. If you missed out on showing your love and to Grand Sheik, I know it says please support the House of Reawakening Minds, but if you want to send anything to him for his 77th solar return, which was on Tuesday, please do it by Cash App or do it by PayPal and put TTB, Grand Sheik, whatever. So we know that we can differentiate between that and a donation to the house. If you want to send something to him, please use our Cash App or our PayPal and just note that it's for him and he will get every penny. We kind of had it was really low, y'all, on Tuesday, but House of Reawakening Minds made it have a nice even number, y'all. But those of you who did, we appreciate those who sent donations. And you know who you are. We did get them. Excuse me. But it was very, and we realized that times are tough for people, but, send a dollar, y'all, send something. This man has been pouring out. He doesn't ask for anything, but he's been pouring out his heart and soul to us for 40 plus years. And at 77, I mean, he's like Brother Rod said, Brother Rod Hayes says he wants Grand Sheik to be able to retire and go wherever he wants to go. And folks were taking that, misconstruing that the first time, we did Where's the Beef, thinking that he wants to sit you down. He's saying, no, you done worked hard. And I know you're not going to retire, but we want you to be in a position that if you wanted to, you didn't have to worry about nothing. So that's how it is. That's how it is, y'all. I don't know if there's any comments on that, but I just, send it, still send your support. I love to see you. We love to see you on the 17th. It's 1 month from today, Grand Sheik.
Yes.
It's actually 1 month from today. The 17th is actually my solar return. But I'll be celebrating my solar return with my sister, Abundance Child from Drop Squad Kitchen. Some of y'all, if y'all been here and had some of that delicious food, well, we have the same solar return. And then we have workshops and 2 days of workshops for those who stay until Sunday. Ends in a holistic fair. Grand Sheik, if weather permitting, we'll be at the Brandywine first thing in the morning. And then we'll have all kinds of things, massages and holistic this and samples and so forth. So y'all want to be here with us. The link is on our website, which is www.houseofreawakeningminds.com. There's no excuse now. If you want to come to stuff, they're going to put more and more stuff that's not going to be on YouTube. I saw somebody in there said, "Oh, we love Brother Asir, the Duke of Tears." Well, I'm gonna have to bring Brother Asir on the Unfiltered channel, because when I bring Brother Asir on here, I get but he speaks the truth, and he doesn't mince his words. So we have to do that. So now we have a website. Thank you, my sister LaChris, for all the work you're doing. And thank you, each and every one of you all, for tuning in. Tell somebody, let somebody else know we now have a website. I'm telling you, when you click on some stuff, you won't find some stuff some places, because it just went up today. But we're going to be filling it with all kinds of great stuff. And we just needed you all to know that is that has moved on, and I'm happy about it, because here we go. Here we go. We are live. Subscribe to our new website, www.houseofreawakeningminds.com. I'm so excited, Grand Sheik.
Me too.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
Yeah, because I'm hoping to get some, what what Abundance showed us. If we could do some of your books like that, and then they would be on it with the pages flipping and stuff like that. Oh my goodness, because I'm excited. I'm really, really excited, and you all should be too. Go there right now and subscribe. Go there right now and find what we have now. Know that it's not complete yet. We just put it up today, but we will have it. It's ongoing. We'll be getting it together. But we Grand Sheik, we put it up because there's information that we need to get out to the people.
Yes,
and we need you to, like I said, subscribe to Brother Rod Hayes's webinar that he's going to be doing, so that you'll get a reminder to click on it. But it's going to be Tuesday, and it's not going to be on YouTube, and it won't be on Facebook. So if you don't come on through our Unfiltered, you're not going to see it. All right. I think that's it. I think that's it, y'all. And with that, we thank you, and
thank you.
And let me find my daughter. Take us out of here, girl.
Deeper and deeper I go. I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me. Come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living the lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store all just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.